How you doing?
Don't
You
ask
look
that question. If I answer that question, there'll be no time for anything else. I will make it short by saying this. I left Hampton. When I left, I by the time I got back to New York, I got so sick, I thought I was going to die.
Mm.
And I say that with no joke. I really thought I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't walk. It took me a long time before I could actually walk. But I've had a lot of advice about a lot of guessing about what was wrong with me. I won't get into that, but I'm feeling good now. I'm back, and I am now like Lee Levine. I'm writing a book.
Good for you.
Here, here. Okay, we're ready to start.
Wait a minute. It says by staying in this meeting, you consent to. Oh, got it. Okay, now I got everybody.
That, and I want to make sure the closed caption is on too.
Why is this just a little thing in the center of the screen? Why isn't it wide?
Why isn't what wide?
Why isn't the picture bigger?
Oh, because you have to adjust that. There's some options that say side to side, or
it says what?
Side to side. There's some options there for what you see on your screen, whether you see everybody.
Okay, what do I want to? And the only one that's lit up says share screen.
No, that's not the one.
Great reaction, and there's more.
More. Let's see what's in more here.
Invite, copy, chat, show chat previews, and that's it.
Well, have you got a form, but can you see all four of us?
Oh, I know. Yeah. Here it is. I think it is at the top left. I'm sorry, top right. It says view. And then you click that on, and there's some options: speaker, gallery, immersive.
Okay. Speaker, gallery.
Yeah. So what is it on? Which one is checked?
Gallery.
Oh, and you still can't see? That's what I have. And I.
What about full screen?
You try that and see what that is.
That's it. There we go. Oh,
we're rocking and rolling today.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is great.
I broke off my tooth yesterday. Well, I broke it off 3 times. I'm getting a massive dental thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I was at the dentist, and I told him at a temporary, and I told him that the teeth have been coming off the temporary because they're installing some stuff in there that's catching hold of it and pulling it off. He said, well, do you still have the teeth? I said, no, I threw them away. They look like fake teeth. He said, no, I can put them back on, though, if you get. So I said, I'll go home and look for it. I can't find it, I'm sure, because I distinctly remember throwing it away. I put it in a little piece of tinfoil, and I threw it away. I said, too much junk on the desk. And I got home, and I'm sitting at the table, and I see a little piece of tinfoil, and I go, and it's got the teeth in it.
There you go.
The only thing of it was, by the time I did this, it was about, it was well into it was night. And he told me that you must be back by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I said, what am I going to do? And a friend of mine in New York, a woman, Nina Sherrard, said, put on a mask. She said, just do it like you were doing it with your students. I said, oh, that would work, wouldn't it? Yeah. And I put the mask on. The mask was covering up my whole face. I said, that won't work. And but I had the piece of the temporary, but on one side it has the place with the missing teeth. I said, I know these people; they'll understand.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of the missing teeth story.
Okay. By the way, should we invite Nina Sharon to the roundtable, to the Zoom?
Who?
Nina Sharon, you just mentioned.
What do you mean, should we invite her?
Well, should we invite her to join the conversation or to watch on Zoom?
I asked her to call me this morning at and she said she would do it, and then she said she called, but she didn't call. And then
No, I'm talking about Sunday.
Oh, you mean this is not live?
This will be recorded right now.
And you'll play it on Sunday.
We'll play it on Sunday, right?
Absolutely, you should invite her.
Okay, well, you'll have to give me the contact information there, right?
I will.
Okay, all right, we're ready to start now.
So, okay, well, now could you just give me about 30 seconds or 15 seconds or 10 of what we're going to do?
Oh, okay. Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you and Jack and Lee, and then you will say what you have to say, and then I'll turn the questioning over to Jack, who'll be first, and to Lee, and they will ask you questions, and you'll respond. And this whole thing, we have allocated 15 minutes of the roundtable to this.
How much do you expect how long do you expect the finished product to be, Dick?
15 minutes.
Okay.
For everything?
Everything in this segment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything at least for 15 minutes.
But we're not in any other segment, right?
Right. Well, later on.
So
well, if you're there live, there'll be a discussion period after people make their presentation, and then anybody can say anything.
No, I want to know right now, how long are we going to be doing what we're doing right now?
15 minutes.
And then we go home.
Yes, if you want to.
Lee, do you have my number in New York?
I do.
Oh, but give it to me.
212.
Got it.
874. 0803.
Great. I think I have it, but that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
He actually
I'd like you to give me a call when your schedule permits.
I'll give you a call.
he actually answers that one.
I'm sorry?
I said he actually answers that one.
That's
Okay.
his phone number.
Earl, I'll give you a call right after this is over.
Okay, are we ready to begin?
Tell
All
Jack White to quit asking trick questions. We're not doing that. Tell him we're not doing that trick question thing today.
No
Okay.
trick.
When do I hold this up?
As soon as when I
Oh, well, you're going to introduce me
right now.
Okay.
And nobody needs to see this, but I have a reason for this being a business student. But I had a professor, Roy Regal, he thought I was doing really well. My major was insurance. He said, well, how did you get this? One day, a high school teacher whom I admired said, if I was a young person starting out right now, he said, I'd get into the insurance business. I think I thought he meant insurance business. To me meant selling policies. When I took this thing to Buffalo, they meant studying the insurance. How do you do the insurance? And so at the end of my first year, this professor said, I have a summer job. I think you should accept this. And it would be great for you and your career. You have a lot of promise. He said, it's in Philadelphia. Oh, I'm going to anybody that will listen to me in my little town. Say, well, I'll be leaving for Philadelphia next. I'm going to Philadelphia because in our town, anybody would any city, any big place, they were going to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was only 100 miles away, but Philly was this place way, and Philadelphians had disdain for people out in our part of the state. But I got to Philly, and I'm thinking I'm going to be working there. Everybody's so proud of me, and I get there and the guy says to me, well, you're black. Nobody's going to hire you here. He said, but He's telling me the professor said he felt I had a lot of promise, and he said, so we're going to send you to an insurance company. And it was in Alabama. I don't recall the name of this company right as we speak this morning. But many years, I never got into the insurance business. I never even spoke about it after that day. But many years later, after I was well down the road on my career in journalism, covering the presidential campaign of the Reverend Jesse Jackson, we went to, just can't call the name of it. Jack may remember it. We went to this insurance company in Alabama and I met a lot of the people there and everything. And I sort of spent some time. It was a very successful operation. That's where they wanted to send me, to that insurance company. And of course, I didn't go. And when I went back home, my high school buddy, who had taken the job at the newspaper, he was asking me, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And it's a very interesting thing. When I came back from Philadelphia, it's on by bus. I didn't have the bus. Didn't stop. The bus will take you to the center of the town and put you out. And instead of me going home about a mile away, I said, I'm going down to the newspaper office and see if Frank is down there. I don't remember what time of day it was, but I went down there and he was there. We had a great reunion. And he says to me, you know, there's a job opening. I told him about, I was never going back to Buffalo. I was never going back to that school. They sent me to Alabama. And I took that to mean, and against the guy in Philly says, you're black, that nobody was going to hire me. And so he said, there's a job opening in that. It was reading proof and being an assistant on the sports desk. And he was getting to me because this guy was I believe he might have been the sports editor by that point. I'm not sure, but he was in that. And long and the short is, I got the job at the newspaper. And from day one, it was just like you spend so much time trying to understand what it is that you're going to do and searching for your place. And I remember my father telling me, giving me the talk. The talk that he gave me is, he says, you know, you're about to finish high school in another year. And he says, you know, you can't just lay around here after high school. He says, you have to learn to do something. You have to get a job. You have to work. He said, in this town, it's a lot of work up in these mountains. He said, but a lot of the jobs are not fit for a man. But you will wind up at one of these plants. And he made me go in the next, after he gave me the talk, in my junior year of high school, he sent me to one of those plants to work. And I went there, it's called the sewer pipe plant. In my region of Pennsylvania, where there was coal was predominant. There was coal, deep coal. There was surface coal. As a matter of fact, my mother said that when we came up and when I got older, I was asking, well, how did we get up here? I thought, I didn't want to say, well, we're running for something, but we were pretty far back in the mountains. But my mother said that we were going to this place where there was all this work. And she said that when they got to this little town, she said, that's where I put my foot down. I told your father, I'm not going any further back into these mountains than this. And she said she thought it'd be too isolated for the children. We were a family of 10, of which 6 survived. If you look at it now, when my parents came up to Pennsylvania from the South, they had lost the first 2 in our family. And when they came to Pennsylvania, they lost the first 2 more up there. But this was the big pandemic of the 100 years ago. They came up there in the early 1920s. And So that's sort of where I start my life. And by the way, one of the things I carry from what I said about the surface coal, my mom said, "Oh, your father had a great place picked out. We were going to go," but she said it was too isolated. But she said it just had everything. And one of the things she meant, she said, even a place where you can go and dig your own coal right on our own property. And the older I got, the more I'm thinking, geez, we could have been like a lot of those white people up there. When the surface,
That's a good place. That's a good
and
place.
they sliced the mountains open.
That's a good place for me to interrupt, Earl.
The only 3 seconds. Only I lost my place. But at any rate, we'd have been like the other people up there. They had that surface coal. A lot of them bought helicopters and crashed and everything because they had got all that coal money. Anyhow,
we're going to go to our first question from Jack
Knight. I followed the newspaper business. And
Earl, let's let Jack answer the
question. Okay.
Okay. Earl, I want to leap forward a few years from that. It was a period of time in the late 60s and early 70s when you were almost like a black journalistic zealot. You were in the middle of every big story. You were present when Dr. King was killed. You covered the trials of Angela Davis and Patty Hearst, and you were also, but most memorably for us and for our discussion today, you were at the center of the federal government's attempt, the Nixon administration's attempt at that time, to co-opt you into becoming part of their crackdown on the Black Panther Party. And your case, it became a lightning rod for Black journalists around the country. The document you showed at the beginning from the New York Association of Black Journalists, and then later on, and the part I want you to talk about right now, was when Black journalists from around the country, there were only a handful of us at the time, gathered in Jefferson City, Missouri, to show our support for you. And we created an organization that later became one of the forerunners of the National Association of Black Journalists. In fact, I think we can argue that your case was really sort of the starting point for the organization of Black journalists that we've seen now, and the sort of joint identity that Black journalists have formed over that period of time. Can you talk about a little about that and what it felt like to moving from being a journalist covering big stories to becoming actually the center of a big story yourself?
Yes. Let me just say, that when I started my career, I was a sports writer up in the mountains, and it went very well. And Frank, the guy who got back then, they would train you, but they wanted you to leave once you got training and really knew what to do, because they weren't going to pay you. They used to pay us in cash, and I said they pay us in cash because so little, they don't want anybody to know how little we get. But I started off with sports, and I went then to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And my career did very well there, and I applied for a job in the state capitol, sports writer, and I didn't get that. When I went up, I was interviewed, and they hired me. I came back and gave notice, but I never heard from those people again. And the editor of the paper said, "We really like you. We want you. We'll let you take your resignation back." And I didn't want to go back to sports. I thought, I'm going to be here the rest of my life, and so I wanted to get news. And I got news training and became a news reporter there. And very soon, I was in just a very short period of time. And one of the things about the news business, reporters would go to get other jobs. There was a lot of movement. And when you got another job, if you could see, you call back to your old friends at that paper. I noticed a lot of people in Lancaster went to Wilmington, Delaware, called back, maybe about 3 or 4 people went there. They didn't call me. Then I had the group that went to Rochester, New York, and they got up there and they called me. And I went up there. They said, "It's great, Caldwell, you'll love it." I went up there, got an interview with a guy named Al Newhart, who then became a very prominent leader in journalism. And he hired me. But when I went to Rochester, they asked me, "Would you, as a black reporter," they didn't say it's a black reporter, "is you as a black person, is you as a Negro, would you object to writing about the Negro community?" No, I said no. I jumped at it because I didn't know. Hadn't been around a big, major black community, so it was, and I accepted it. And then, of course, that launched me on a whole new phase of my career. And the issues and things that I wrote about in Rochester, they would be the same things that I would work. And I left Rochester to to go to New York City, and I was on the race story, you might say, really for the rest of my career. But you could almost feel every year there was certain that it was like you're writing about yourself and your own community, and you're asking people to tell you stuff, to use their name and put their name in the newspaper. And so it was a whole different experience for me. And that would lead me, after I came to New York, unfortunately, the Herald Tribune, my first paper, folded. I wound up at the New York Post. New York Times told me to come over there, and I did. And this would be in March of 1968. And that summer would be the greatest. There was no other summer like it in America for racial uprisings. And that was the start of a whole different twist to what we were doing and who we were. And by then it was 1968, as I said. And meeting people that had whole different ideas of what it meant to be a Black American. I remember the Alambe Brath and his brother, two young guys about my age then, had a little studio on 125th Street. And they had what they called the A-Jazz dancers, the A-Jazz performers. And these were Black women who had almost no hair. And they were promoting pictures of Black. One of the Brath brothers was a photographer, and he would be taking these pictures of the blackest Black people he could find. And they was the first time, the beginning of this gravitating to Black. And it was in every way, it was such a fascinating time.
How did that lead to this meeting that Jack was referencing?
Covering Black America was always, every day, was just a chock full of who knows what's coming today. Jack, I don't know if I missed your question.
I wanted you to talk about Jefferson City and what happened there and how important that was in creating this sort of a unification of Black journalists.
When this whole thing with the government started, I didn't take it seriously. I believed in what we used to call in the newsroom the power of the press. And whenever as a matter of fact, an FBI agent told me they were going to do this if I didn't cooperate with what they wanted. And I was talking to them like, they don't know, you have no idea. I'm telling them, you have no idea what's going to come down on you if you do that. And I did not realize that in the scheme of things, there was no power of the press. We had the power maybe to destroy some people's careers by saying certain things, this, that, and that. But when it came to our defending our position about what we considered our rights, we really didn't have the power to make those things real. And but I didn't understand that. So when I really didn't take it seriously at the beginning. But when we went to Jefferson City, I did, because the government began to move right away about making this real. And I'll remember the first time I appeared before a judge, and they made it clear that if you don't cooperate, you will go to jail. And I couldn't believe that they would actually put me in jail. I just couldn't believe it. And then once you realize that, it changes everything. But Jefferson City was a huge turning point, because I didn't even know we had all of the Black journalists. And we all slipped off from our jobs and went out to this college in Missouri for what was just a very emotional weekend, but just to know that all of us existed and that everybody there had ideas, and we discussed, how can we defend Earl Caldwell? How can we do this? What do we do? And so it was a giant turning point. But prior to Jefferson City, when I actually had to go before the federal authorities for the first time, one of the stunning things that I was found, and I didn't find it, other people found it at the New York Times. Said, well, the problem here is that the government's action and the government's petition, it only speaks of Earl Caldwell. He has this information. The New York Times was not in it in any way. It was just me. Oh, you're out sort of by yourself.
Earl, hold up for a second. When you first got the notice that the government was coming after you, what was the attitude of the New York Times management, the editors there? What did they think you should do? What did they advise you to do?
Well, they didn't advise me to. They told me, and one of the things I would say about the New York Times is that they never told me what to do. They said it would be my decision, but they had Jim Goodale introduced me to the New York Times lawyers, and they had lawyers who didn't have the same position as these people, these reporters who were on this thing. Those of us who were Black. But in this period, I mentioned Lambre Breath also, there was a big change in who we were. The Black people, colored people, that threw that thing all away and became Black. And it was just that. And the Black journalists, one of the things the Black journalists began to do was organize. We actually began to organize before I was subpoenaed. In New York, we called it Black Perspective. The reason being, Thomas A. Johnson was one of the senior most of the Black journalists there. And he said, if it's called Black, I can't be in it. He said the New York Times wouldn't allow it. He said you could have an organization of all the Black people, but you couldn't call it Black. And they were reluctant to even use Black in describing people of color.
Who was the editor then, Earl?
Abe Rosenthal.
Okay.
And Abe Rosenthal he loved Tom Johnson. He hired Tom. He hired me too. He hired me without an interview. I was working at the New York Post. I came to the paper and asked me, the New York Times, and they told me, said, you won't be writing anything for a number of weeks. This is the New York Times, you have to go through orientation. So we do things, we have our own system, your own style. They had their own style book. And then on the day that my first day there, I had my brand new Brooks Brothers suit. An editor says to me, and I was supposed to be sitting at the front with editors and see how they make up the paper and all that kind of stuff. And one of the editors said, "Anybody talk to you?" I'm saying, "About what?" He said, "Well, no, nothing. I just wonder if anyone's mentioned anything." And you see the guys looking at me, and finally Arthur Gelb comes over to me. It was number 2 behind Abe, and says, "We'd like you to go out on a story. Would you mind doing it?" He said, "I know you're supposed to be on orientation, but..." I said, "No, what's the story?" They were James
Meredith.
Meredith pulling out of the race against Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And I went up to Harlem, did the story, came back, and I remember Manny Perlmutter came over to my desk. He was a veteran reporter. He said, "I just can't believe that you're writing a story on your first day." He said, "That's just not like the New York Times." He said, "You have to go through orientation. You got to understand this is the New York Times and how you do." I started writing on the first day. Never went back to orientation. I'm still not sure about understanding that. The next day, someone from the New York Post called me and said, "Hey, if you were just going over there to write reaction stories, you could have stayed here and done that." But they had a good point. Why was it so important for me to go to Harlem to write a reaction story? I said to Manny Perlmutter, I said, "This is nothing. I could have written this story without leaving the office." Woo! He clattered up and started to rain on me. He said, "This is the New York Times. You make up something in this paper." And you... I told him, "No, I didn't mean I'd make up anything. I was just trying to say that why was I pulled off of my orientation to do what I considered a very small little story." But was the deal. And I never went back. I never had any orientation. I never had even that interview of what we're going to do, what's this and that and the other thing,
Okay, but Earl, when your case came up though, didn't you have the feeling, I think you've told me this before, that the New York Times was trying to encourage you to cooperate with the FBI at this point? And wasn't that sort of the message you were getting from them?
That was definitely the message. It might have even turned out that way, but it was, we had organized this group called Black Perspective, and so we didn't get into that black journalist thing, so Tom could come in and everything. And but Tom and Gerald and I at the New York Times, I mean, we were like the passion, the obsession. After work every night, the 3 of us would go sometimes we'd take the New York Times car. We would be going out. Our job didn't end because we were leaving the paper. It was, you keep going. And so when something happened to me, it was happening to all of us. We were making the decision. It quickly became this thing involved, and it swept across the Black community. And I think even the New York Times was surprised at the Black response.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wonder if now, Lee, do you want to jump in here and ask you a question about?
I want to say one other thing, if I could. Black people are criticized so often for not doing this, not having that, not preparing for things. And what happened we were looking for a lawyer for me, just reporters. By then I had been sent out to California to do some stuff, and I'm out there, and we don't have a lawyer, and there's a specific date. You got to appear before the court. We didn't have a lawyer. And I remember the night before I'm supposed to appear before the court, and in the morning, we didn't have a lawyer. And we're talking about the lawyers we know. We knew criminal lawyers. And then we got a call from New York. the call came from Jack Greenberg, who was at Columbia then. He was the head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And they said, we know you need a lawyer. And they understood a constitutional lawyer. And they said, we have a lawyer. And he's in California. He's in Northern California, where I was. And they told me I should go to see him. And I took this information to the group. I think about 4 or 5 Black journalists from out there. And the first thing, I got this lawyer, gonna work. Is he Black? I said, I haven't met him. I don't know anything about him. They say he's down in Los Altos, which is near Stanford University. And we went down there. And then that's where I think I got the greatest break of my life. When I met Tony Amsterdam, who was a constitutional lawyer, and he was with the Legal Defense Fund. He was also a professor at Stanford University. And I'll always remember, when we went to his house, first place we were going out, we were in cafes, going to talking about getting a lawyer. When we got to Amsterdam's house, it was close to midnight. And we had to call him to see if he would even still. And he said, no, we're waiting for you. He says, I know you're coming, we're waiting. And we got to his house. I had said, I'm not doing it. They can't make me do it. But those were just statements from I want to say the stupid, because you don't really know. We got to Amsterdam's house. He was waiting for us. We weren't in his house 3 or 4 minutes. And he said he'd been talking to people from New York. And he said, I've been looking into this. And he said, I'm convinced you have a legal right to refuse. I'm saying, I'm not going to do it. You can't make me do it. I'm not going to go to jail, they're saying. He said, you have a legal right to refuse. And that was like manna from heaven. That just changed everything. It changed everything forever. And he was absolutely right. And he made the New York Times vice president, Harding Bancroft, flew to California to support Caldwell. And on the morning following that night, when I met Amsterdam, I was to go before the federal grand jury. And Amsterdam says to me, when after he told me, he says, no, I don't want you to go. You don't go. I said, what do you mean I don't go? He said, I'm going for you. You stay home. He said, no, I want you to come to this office. The Times had hired a lawyer in San Francisco. He said, but you come 2 or 3 hours late and don't come in. Don't say anything. You just stay in the waiting room. I'll come get you. I'm in that little waiting room there in the Pillsbury Madison Sutro office. Harding Bancroft comes out. He has to go to the bathroom, and he says, oh, this lawyer, Amsterdam, where did you find him? He said, this is the best thing to happen to us so far. He said, he's just great. And he goes on. In time, they would come to hate him. But Amsterdam was a brilliant constitutional lawyer. And he, in the Legal Defense Fund, would take on from that point all of the expense of the litigation. And Tony Amsterdam would map out a strategy. It went in the district court. The New York Times called the decision of the court in the district court a great victory and said it's over. And then Amsterdam said no. Caldwell would still have to go before the grand jury, and he said he doesn't want me to go before the grand jury. He's right when he's the argument that I was making. I go before the grand jury. It's a secret proceeding. The prosecutor come out and say anything. He said, and he's going to fight for me not to go at all. And that broke everything between me and the New York Times. There was a famous memorandum, I don't have it with me, in the Abe Rosenthal posted on the bulletin board in New York all the reporters were in an uproar, I'm told. And basically what he said in there was, and he used this language, we all feel sorry for Earl Caldwell and the difficult position he finds himself in. New York Times not in it. It's not their reporting. So that's when we went our own way. But Tony Amsterdam crafted out a brilliant approach to all of this. We won a great victory in the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And I believe we would have prevailed at the Supreme Court level, but the newest member of the court was William Rehnquist. And he had been in the Justice Department speaking about me. Fred Graham said, you wouldn't believe what this lawyer, Fred Graham covered justice for the New York Times. He called me in California. You wouldn't believe what this lawyer in the Justice Department is saying about you, man. And this was Rehnquist. I'm trying to find those documents now. But Rehnquist cast the deciding vote in this. But by that time, the Supreme Court ruled the Black Panthers were decimated. There was not much left, and so it was really moot insofar as I'm concerned. But I felt and still feel today that we won that case. To prevail, they had to steal it, which I believe they. If Rehnquist would have stepped aside, recused himself, then it would have been a tie, and we would have prevailed. So, but that was another story.
Okay. All right, Lee.
Oh, so many questions. I guess I'll limit myself to this one. Earl, of course, some years after your ordeal, the extent to which the FBI was engaged in a covert counterintelligence campaign to destroy the Panthers became known, as well as the extent to which part of that campaign was attempting to manipulate press coverage of the Panthers. Talk about the extent to which at the time you were aware or not aware of what the FBI was up to, or the extent to which you suspected what the FBI was up to.
The FBI never dealt with me, and I don't think the FBI ever dealt really with Black journalists in the way they did. You have, for example, when I came to New York City, there was no commanders of any of the precincts who was Black. They appointed one in Harlem, and I remember when this guy got the job, he would invite Tom and Gerald and I to come have dinner. Let's go dinner and talk. And he would introduce. Sometimes he'd bring a high-ranking officer with him, and he would introduce us to him. And so we had a relationship. And in those relationships, you see things you can mention to them, or if they see things they can ask them. There's a way that you can hold on to your position, your rights, your conduct, but there is a communication. There was no communication with the FBI. They didn't tell me nothing ever. And we had organized a Black Journalists Association in California. When I was sent out to California after the King assassination to find out, well, what are the Black people going to do? And the Panthers had already picked up the gun, so they took that. And that's when I began to see things and became aware of the experiences of other journalists were having with the FBI, or things happening involving the Panthers. But with the Panthers, it was the killing of Fred Hampton in Chicago. And that would be a big turning point. They came in the night, guns, and even they would, the police officials in Chicago, they all conceded that there was a lot of things that were done that were not right, including the killing of him. And we took that to mean as reporters, the FBI, they're coming for the Black Panthers main office. Chicago, it was a Chicago bureau office. And it was a certainty that they were coming for the head office in Oakland, Berkeley. And indeed, yeah, back then when the old type reporters learned how to read upside down, and a reporter in Oakland was reading upside down on a desk that he a law enforcement official, and it was a plan to invade the Black Panther headquarters. The reporter wanted to write the story. The Oakland Tribune wouldn't let him do it. They didn't publish the story, but he told this to others, and including he told Black reporters. I went there. There was the head of the Black journalist thing in Oakland was a guy named Rush Greenlee, and he was working for the public television station. And in San Francisco, they had created a unique kind of broadcast. They would bring the reporters in around a round table, and they would discuss stuff and could ask questions back and forth. We were going to have a little meeting after their broadcast, and I'm in a cafe right across the street from them, sitting watching the show, having a beer, and suddenly two of these guys, Rush and Walt, a guy named Walt Thompson, I think it was, they go grab the microphone from the guy who was the host. Said, we got to commandeer the microphone. There's stories going on and things are happening against the Black community. And so we've got to make you aware. They won't print the story. And they were talking about this raid on the Black Panthers. And that was like unheard of. You don't just took over the broadcast. We had a Black journalist meeting, the only Black journalist meeting ever at my house, in my apartment. And we had a guy work for the Black paper, Rufus Byars.
Oh boy.
And he showed up at a meeting.
What about the Amsterdam News?
He worked for the Black paper in San Francisco.
Oh, in San Francisco, okay.
Yeah, and he showed up at the meeting. He came, had this big bag. I'm thinking like, wow, here come Rufus, and he got a bag full of food. I guess he knew I wouldn't have anything. And Rufus comes in, but he doesn't take the food. He just comes in and we're talking. I'm wondering, well, why is the food just sitting there? And we were talking about what had happened and what the FBI was doing and what the Black Panther. And he grabs this bag and puts it on the table, turns it up. He got the bag full of pistols. I'm looking at this guy thinking like, what is going on? And he said, the time has come, the Black journalists got to pick up the guns. He said, they're coming for the Black Panthers. They're going to come for us. They're already come for Caldwell. And he said, we get to pick up the gun. And he starts passing his gun out to all of the reporters. And I'm thinking like, I'm not putting my fingerprints on one of them. And so I said, wait a minute, Rufus, wait a minute. Don't you tell me that I am afraid to pick up the gun. I said, my father gave me a rifle when I was 16, and I went up the mountains. And he said, oh, no, wait a minute. So, you are a righteous brother. I know you are not afraid to pick up the gun. He said, he's at the woods. And now I'm laughing. But I say that to say there was serious ideas about what our conduct ought to be and what we ought to be prepared to do to face the moment and the situation that we found ourselves.
Wow. Okay. All right. Let me target our audience now of journalists and people who no doubt, and those from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press as well, who no doubt would like to hear what you have to say in terms of advice for this current generation of journalists, given what you've been through and given the case that prompted the Reporters Committee. What would you say to them now about some of the priorities they should be having?
When I went to Hampton University, and with the Scripps Howard Foundation had built a wonderful building to house this new thing. It's the first journalism school that they were part of the Black colleges. And I must say, when I went to Hampton, I started off with the same thing as I started off here today with this document. And that would become my way of introducing the students at the university to what was actually happening and how it would involve that they would be pulled into this, going into journalism, what they ought to know, what they ought to be prepared for, and what was coming at them. And the kids, of course, were very, very much on the side of the Black Panthers. It really, in the Black community, eventually, the Panthers had a lot of support in the Black community, because I'm not saying it was the guns. I think it was a way that they were not afraid to go against whatever authority it would be, mainly police authority. And it resonated across Black America. And the students had that same kind of attitude. They wanted to be, hard-hitting reporters. When I went to Hampton University 20 years ago, print journalism ruled. When I went in there, I always compare it with Jack, there's old pictures about the African kings or whatever, they carry them in. I felt like that. I came in, I was a big celebrity to university simply because of this whole thing that I had been through. And then we couldn't see it right away, but the whole print journalism thing was coming apart. It would be not very long when I was there that the print journalism was dropped as you could get a degree in print journalism. They dropped it. It was this whole this upheaval brought by the technology. You could not have prepared for it, and that is what swept over journalism at Hampton in just a very few years. But when I went there to start, we were doing an oral history led by the idea of Dory Maynard, who was at the Maynard Institute then. And we began to get the stories of Black journalists, what they had been through, how they saw things, where we should go and all of this. And we began to record them. We recorded them in New York, and our work in New York got interrupted because of the 9/11 attacks on New York City. And then we went to California and recorded. And then when I went to Hampton, we came to Hampton and recorded. I think one of the very first we recorded in Hampton University was Jack E. White Jr., who's here today. And I always remember that sitting with the dean that day, that fella whose name I can't recall, but he said to me, "We got to get him down here. We got to get him on the faculty." And Jack did join the faculty shortly after that.
Yep.
Earl, are you talking about Tony Brown?
I'm sorry.
Are you talking about Tony Brown?
This is the fellow
No,
before.
no,
Lee Brown.
no. This was Tony Brown's predecessor. Later
Oh, I
went
thought-
on to become head of the journalism school at Southern Mississippi University. I can't recall his name
Oh,
right now.
okay. All right.
Yeah, he was
All right.
the
Anyway,
second.
anyway, Earl, you were saying your message for the current generation of journalists.
I couldn't hear you. You said what?
Your message for the current generation of journalists.
I'm losing the sound.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Your message.
No, I can't hear you.
When you sit back, Richard, that he can hear you, but when you lean
All right.
forward,
How about this?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Your message
Thanks,
for the
Richard.
current generation of journalists.
At Hampton University, I said that I went in like a king and print journalism. Jack was there. And we were getting all the papers, get the Washington Post and New York. They wouldn't even pick, the students wouldn't even pick the papers up.
Right.
Students saw something before the professors saw it. And that was the beginning of the end of print journalism. I mean, it just didn't exist. The students saw another way to tell stories. On the last class I had at Hampton University, in my last semester there, I think I had 20, maybe 24, maybe about 21, 23 some students. I think I gave 9 of them an A+. I think I gave about 8 of them an A. And the rest of them I gave A-. It's the best class I had. I was asking the students, had been challenging the students for some time, is this new media that was coming within the journalism school itself. When I went there, the largest component in the journalism school was broadcast journalism, and then it was public relations, and then I think it was print. Public relations survived, and it was always a very popular part of the school. Hampton University is overwhelmingly women. Probably, I think it was like 90-some% when I started there. Most of the people were learning how to be reporters. I'm sorry. When I first went there, they had, and this was the staff that was already in place. They had, before Scripps Howard got involved, they had some kind of a journalism entity, but it changed dramatically once the new building and all of that. But it was primarily, the focus was on reporting. They used to send the students out to actual city council meeting from the daily press, the local newspaper. They covered things. The emphasis was on reporting. When the change came, one of the things that got lost was the reporting. It wasn't, we weren't teaching reporting. It was more preparing people for television jobs. And those jobs were really like anchors' jobs. But what happened was, this new technology, the students were excellent at understanding and how you use these new platforms. And so they began to develop a whole different way of, I would say, storytelling. In that last semester, when I gave all of the high grades, I mean, I would like to, we don't have the time for me to get into it, but I'd like to, these students took projects. You know, in Hampton, you have to either have a final exam or a final project. And these final projects that they took on, pandemic was going on by then too, but they were brilliant. They knew how to take the pictures. And I said, well, wait a minute. The cameras, the university's cameras are here. I can see them. They're all lined up. Students aren't here. They said, we used our phones. Okay. How did you edit those film? You know how to edit film? Girl says to me, anybody knows anything about the Scripps Higher School of Journalism knows that you cannot pass if you are not proficient in Final Cut Pro editing program. Okay. So you were taking pictures, you're editing the film. They could do the whole thing. One person could actually do, and on this new media, you could put that out there. One of my students, I think it was his grandfather or his great grandfather. Excuse me for but he was in the Marines, and he was the first Black to hold a high position in the Marines. This kid had this grandfather out in the backyard recording him with the phone, telling his story about. And I later saw it on a major channel in Virginia. It was amazing. He's asking him these questions. He's edited the film, and he brings back to me in my class a total finished product. We had a young woman who was she's a woman who was the star Little League baseball pitcher, a Black woman, and she was now a student and an athlete playing this softball team at Hampton. She says, you know, we go out on these to play these games. We go out for like 2 weeks, and we play this team for 3 games, and we play 2 over here. We play, and so they're out. And she talked about how that time that you have, and she took and laid out the places where they would be, and then investigated what civil rights. How did civil rights movement impact these towns? And what is around these towns that you could specifically go and see and understand? And she did a 1-hour television, and I don't want to say television, she did a 1-hour presentation on film. It was just stunning. The way that she found out the way that she was able to bring all these pieces together, but do everything herself. She did the research. She took the pictures. She did the editing. I mean,
so this is why I think this is the direction you think that we should be going, that the current generation should be.
No, I'm not saying that. I would ask the students constantly, is this the golden era for Black people that had no ownership in media? But suddenly you have a platform where you can take to any story that you have to tell. And these kids have skills. They know how to tell these stories from A to Z, which I think is revolutionary. To be able to do this. Before, just the cost of these things would be prohibitive. Yeah, but now they can do it.
So what is your message to this generation?
I can't hear you.
Back up.
What is the message?
Back up, Richard. You can't hear you.
How about this?
That's better.
Okay. What is your message then to this current generation, that this is the kind of thing they should emulate?
The thing that I see is it is within the grasp of this generation to maybe give us the kind of media that we've never had in this country. Fair, inclusive, and daring, because they don't see any sacred cows. You know, we're going to do anything. For example, I mentioned these two, and one young woman, she told me, for her final project, she wanted to take 12 students and wanted to zero in on their lives about what the pandemic did to them. How it did, well, about halfway through the time, she come to me and said, I want to change. I said, what do you mean? She said, I don't want to do that. I'm saying, you're halfway through the class. How are you not going to do it? The reason is there was so much pain that in all the things that these students were going through, just didn't want to deal with it. I said, so what are you going to do for your final project? She said, I'm going to do something on roller skating. I said, you're not serious. So, what do you mean? This is your final grade you're talking about. She said, no, I want to do something on roller skating. I said, tell me a story about what you want to do. She said, well, we got these here big size plus women and they're doing this thing. And I said, whoa, back up. What are you talking about? Big women. I let that go. And she said, and then you got the white roller skating and the black roller skating. You got the big people and the thick. And she had all this thing about, I said, I don't see any story here that you're telling that would fit into the situation we're doing. But I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will let you give me, and you could, and I said, I don't remember the amount of time. I gave her time to really bring her idea together and present it to me, and she did. And then after that, I was actually stunned, and I'm gonna skip forward here now to the final product. It was amazing how she took an idea about roller skating and made a big social, political statement with it. First places, I didn't even realize roller skating is such a popular thing. And you've got all different kinds of people are into roller skating. But she was able to zero in on it, talk to these people, edit this film and bring it all together in a really a professional way. I thought it was, but my point is, the students know how to use all of these elements in this new media. And they can bring together things that I don't know where we're going, but let me put it like this. Judy Claves, who was the president of the Scripps Howard Foundation, she resigned. She came to make her last speech at the journalism school. And one of the things she said at the very end was, she said to the students, these times have changed. Everything is different now. And she told the students, don't you be afraid to go into entrepreneurial ventures, because the technology will allow you to do things that you couldn't even thought of before. How can you do it? I would, let me go one step further. I'm sitting in there and I'm listening to all this and I'm thinking like, wow, this is me now. I'm thinking like, I could have my own BET network myself. I could, before, I remember Bob Johnson got BET, I'm thinking like, I'd like to do that. There was a guy, I think he has Charter Communications, I forget his name, Malone. And they talk about all the money that was needed for to do this to do the BET thing. Now you can go on this new media, and all of these things are within reach. Within reach of your skills, in reach of your money, in reach of your this new world that the students are just in love with and that they're constantly engaged with, and they can see it. And they brought it to class. I thought that was one of the most stunning things for me to walk out the door with at Scripps Howard.
All right. I think that's a good point to end on. Thank you, gentlemen. By the way, Chris Campbell is the guy we were thinking of.
Chris Campbell, right.
Yeah, who preceded Tony Brown.
Right.
Thank you all. This is
well, no, can I make a closing statement?
No. All right, what's your closing statement? What's the closing statement?
I want to say this to Lee Levine. Sometime Lee came down to Hampton. We talked.
Right.
And he asked me one day, what about your FBI file? I said, I don't even want to know. I don't want to know what they were doing where I'm concerned, because I said it would just be chilling for me. I got enough of it. Because of what I see the students are able to do, I'm saying, I think I'm going to get that file and see what's in it, see what they're doing. There's so much that we don't know. And we're in a very difficult, how we are in America now. It used to be, it was so simple being a reporter. You're trying to search for the truth. And as Giuliani says now, what truth? We got a whole lot of truth. Everything is on the table. What are we building? What are we going to do? I can see that there is a way forward. And I think that these young people have a big leg up because they are the children of this new media. And now for myself, as an old head, I actually find myself some days now when I can get out of bed leaving. And I actually could. I have a little name, Earl Caldwell's Bison Network. But it sounds like some Caldwell nonsense, but it does make it possible. Once you see the technology, the skills that are within just the film editing. The day the student said to me, everybody knows anything about Scripps Howard, and I've been there longer than anyone, knows that you can't graduate if you're not proficient in Final Cut Pro. I didn't know that. But that was in the TV thing. I'm not really into that. But my point is, and you could say, well, that doesn't even sound like the university. That sounds like the trade school down the street. And in a way it is. There is a dovetail. There was never any way to teach journalism. The best way to teach new people to come into journalism was to get them a job on a newspaper and have editors work with them and get them started. Students, we want you to come in being proficient in grammar, the basic skills, and we'll show you the way. And I believe that this technology is going to be the portal that we go through to get to the new day, to the new dawn, or to the dawn in the new journalism.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
15 minutes has a new meaning.
Good luck with the editing.
Yes, indeed. Okay, we're gonna, boil this down.
One final little statement. 1 second. So just 3 seconds.
All right, 3 seconds.
You must excuse me because this Zoom is new to me. I was refused Zoom. Now I love Zoom. It's this new thing just within our class.
All right. Well, you were just talking about the new technology, so here we are.
Yeah.
Even our generation can appreciate it.
How would you answer that question? What do you see for the new tech? Where do you see us going?
For me or Lee?
You and Jack. You and Jack and Lee.
I think
we can't
it's
do
still
anything about it.
Huh?
I said it's here. We can't do anything about that. We just have to make sure that it goes in the direction that we want it to go.
No, but what? Go ahead.
The issue for me is how you maintain the consistent values that make journalism important in the face of the new technology. How do you, in a time when you can invent very plausible through this AI or whatever, very plausible versions of a new reality, how do you maintain the credibility of journalism in the future? I think that's going to be very, very difficult. That's one challenge. The other challenge is when you're faced with a political situation in which lying has become the default position of many politicians, and these arguments about whose truth is it are going to prevail. How do you do it? How does journalism retain its credibility in the future? And I'm not sure that we're anywhere near finding answers to that question. The journalism is just widely distrusted now for very good reasons. What passes for journalism is going through changing definitions. When you don't have to work for a newspaper or a magazine or a TV network in order to be considered a journalist, where you can start your own thing, and who knows what your standards are that you're maintaining. I'm not happy about it. I'm glad I'm not still in it, because I think we're all at sea, and I think there's a lot of wobbling that has to be done before we're on firm footing again, if we ever get on firm footing again.
But Jack, this new technology will open the door where before
it opens the door to
people of color. The door was closed completely.
Yeah.
And it's going to open the door.
It opens the door to it's a door. There's a whole lot of doors that it opens, and not all of them are good doors. It's again, I'm going back to this question of how are people supposed to judge in the future which sources of so-called journalism can be trusted, which ones are credible, which ones are really sort of trying to maintain the old standards, and which ones are doing whatever the hell it is that they're doing. And how are people supposed to, we teach critical thinking in at least we used to, where so people could differentiate and decide which sources to trust and which not to trust. But I think that's been constantly undermined, and the same technology that opens up opportunities for people to produce credible journalism also opens up possibilities for them to produce journalism which is not credible, and which will be increasingly difficult for people to decide, to differentiate between the two. So I'm worried. I think the country as a whole is on the cusp of potentially some very, very bad developments. I think the basis of our American democracy is at risk right now. Journalism is part of that. I'm not sure where we're going to come out. I rue the day every day when I think of the world that we're leaving, that I and my generation leaving to my grandchildren. It really does worry me, and I'm not really sure all this new technology is a good thing. I think some of it because I think some of it is way beyond our capacity to rein in and to retain. So I'm not optimistic about it as you seem to be. I'm worried sick.
But Jack, we have the papers. We get lousy papers making stuff up. Yellow journalism. Our history, the history in journalism, that it's never been perfect. It's never been inclusive. They say it's a free press. In the newsroom, they say, yeah, it's a free press for everybody that owns one. You couldn't own one, but now you can do these things. But one of the things, though, is we're blaming journalism for things that are coming out of the pot. This thing that we're doing with the truth and this is coming out of politics. This isn't coming out of journalism. Well, that's not true. You could say Murdoch introduced a lot of it at a certain level, but I saw something on TV last night. Said, I forget who said it, but said they want to challenge the license of somebody on TV. Was that NBC or what? But what I'm saying is why was Murdoch allowed to come to the United States and bring this crazy journalism that he brought with Fox News?
Well, it's not just Murdoch, but anyway, let's hear what Lee has to say. If you want to say anything.
Well, I mean, I always start by saying I'm not a journalist. I was a lawyer who represented journalists, but I will say that in working on my book, one of the things that struck me was something that Earl said just a minute ago, which is that so much of what we think of now as bad, unprecedented stuff in terms of both bad journalism and bad government actors and misinformation, in some ways was worse during the time that Earl was reporting. The kinds of things that the FBI was doing to, covertly influence public opinion. But by the same token, I have to say I agree with Jack that something about today strikes me as, although there are historical predicates, something about the combination of new technology and the Trump phenomenon are a toxic mix like we've never seen before. And I too worry for democracy and for a free press too.
All right, here. Okay, that's going to do it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And
Richard, I have one quick question.
Yes.
Is this going to be what some version of this is going to be our portion of the program on Sunday?
Yes.
So
I'm going to send out later on the run of the show, and this will be the 15-minute portion. And I think what we'll do is show excerpts of this during that 15 minutes, and then make the whole thing available also, so that anybody who wants to watch the whole thing can do so.
You mean
so do you still want me or need me on Sunday?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, there's also the discussion after this.
Okay.
A free for all, people talk about, and there's also other parts of the program which certainly concern media law.
Okay.
That concerns specifically the journalists who have been arrested during protests and all that kind of thing. Yes.
In this whole new thing we're looking at, how
Yes.
do you define journalism? Who are the journalists?
That was really one of the points that I was trying to make, is that, if someone says that they work for the New York Times, then you assume that there's certain standards, there's certain processes and whatever that they go through in order to produce the product that they're putting online or in the paper. If somebody who works for, I don't know, brand X, you don't know what standards they're for. You don't know what they're doing. Anybody can call themselves a journalist in this country. Anybody can. And that's one of the reasons that we're so fearful about it, because you just don't know. I mean, there are Fox News. I have a number of former co-workers at time at the Washington Post who went to work for Fox News. I consider them to be real journalists. They're people who follow the kind of procedures that I learned that you use, to make sure that you're being accurate, to make sure you're being fair, and all the rest of it. But they're in an environment where the overall mission is to push a certain political point of view, and where their stories get swamped. You saw what happened. A lot of them got fired after reporting accurately in the last election that Trump had lost in Arizona. You saw what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
So it worries me. I don't know who a journalist is anymore, and that's one of the reasons I'm so concerned.
Consider the source. That's always been a good maxim to follow. All right. Thank you all so much. I'll see you on Sunday, and enjoy the rest of the day.
And I'd just like to say, Richard,
Jack, are you still going to be there in person?
No, if I'm still, I'm still, as I said earlier, I'm still getting over this COVID. It
Yes.
really depends on how I am on Saturday. If I'm okay, I'll come up. If I'm
Okay.
still,
All right. Well, if you do come up, you have to supply in advance, and that's by today or tomorrow.
I'm thinking it's not likely because I think I'm
Okay.
still.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
did,
Because
Did you
they want people to submit their vaccination proof.
did you say get over the cold or COVID?
No, he said COVID.
COVID.
Mm.
Yeah. The big C.
Wow. Well, we'll talk. Give me a buzz. Richard, thanks so much. I appreciate the invitation.
All right. Thank
Let
you.
me
This
say that you look very good with that mustache. I'm a
Thanks. Well, and you and Jack with your beards, you know. What can I say? All right. See you all on Monday then.
All right, great to see you guys. I'm sorry
Likewise.
that I was so disjointed, but you know, this is the first time that I've met this talk and these things in many a moon. But welcome. It's nice to be back.
All right.